Okay, it is right on the hour, and I'd like to get started here. We have a lot to talk about. So, this is a monthly interview that I do for my blog Praxis. And this month we have Paul Millard, who um, started, actually didn't, I don't know if you started, but you had a period of time where you worked in strategy consulting. And he basically reached out to me because he had turned that experience. I also kind of started in consulting. So, we have a similar path, but he turned that experience, which is sort of intangible and kind of up in the air, into a series of concrete products, online courses among them. And I know a lot of my audience, a lot of my followers are interested in doing something similar at some point or other, turning their intangible knowledge into something concrete that can expand beyond their reach, that can provide maybe passive income, that can build a reputation. There's really countless benefits. So thank you, Paul, for joining us. And do you want to kick us off just by giving us an overview of all the many things you do and are involved in?
Yeah, sure. So I think much like you, I'm self-employed right now and trying to hack a living across several different creative things I like to do, both following my curiosity and also just trying to also make a living, make some income along the way, but also do the things that matter to me. So I I worked for 10 years in the corporate world. I worked in strategy consulting at firms like McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group and a few others. I went self-employed a couple years ago, and I started out just I kind of thought that okay, I would do freelance consulting projects. And what I quickly found was I had a little more freedom, a little more flexibility, and once I had space and time, I actually was drawn to just start creating stuff. So some things I'd been working on for side projects, which we'll probably dig into, and also some other things. I started creating a podcast. I started doing some writing, longer form writing around the future of work, and also with the consulting that started to be like a tangent that on the side that I was writing about. I was volunteering around that, and that slowly morphed into some mentoring I was doing, some coaching I was doing. And last year, I decided to turn everything I had learned into a product because I had started to have a lot of conversations where I'd be having these short conversations with people, and people would be like, holy crap, like
Mhm.
you need to share this information. And I think a lot of people look at these firms like, oh, I wish I could gain the experience of working there. So I really just decided to create it because I wanted to share it and get it out there.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, that's so cool. Just a couple logistical things in case anyone hasn't been on a call with me. If you're in a place where you can turn on your video, that's actually helpful. I like to do more meeting style rather or roundtable style rather than webinar style. Um, if not, I totally understand. Also, there's a chat. If you click the chat button in the toolbar, you'll see a little window pop up on the side, and I encourage you to be there. You can put in questions, comments, other resources or things that you know of that you want to drop in. Paul, you should probably have that closed because it's quite distracting.
Okay.
But I'll have it open, and if there's anything that's relevant to what we're talking about that moment, I'll just kind of field those to you. And for the structure of the next hour, I'm probably going to spend around the first half just going through the points, the bullet points that Paul mentioned as kind of his main things he had to share. And then I'll leave the second half, for maybe a little bit less, for questions and just things you guys want to talk about. It's a small enough group that we can get into some sort of exchanges, which is nice. So yeah, let's see. So take us, Paul, in a little more detail through.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your email to me that you started with a resume course. So like take us back to that moment where you transitioned, almost like I assume there was kind of like an identity shift, like from consulting where you're this like slick, very perfectionistic, clean cut service provider, customer service, responsive, reactive, on call, to then a creator having to focus, having to be self-managed, having this like concrete thing you're doing. What was that moment, and what kind of pushed you over that line?
So it definitely sounds like you were a consultant as well. Um, I So yeah, I think stepping back, I went to business school, went back into consulting, and ended up going through a health challenge. And emerging from that, I kind of looked at work in a new way. Whereas I had a hard time making sense of just my whole identity being work and kind of success. And I think with that, I had a lot of creative energy kind of bubble to the surface. And I started writing on the side. And that turned into some experiments I started doing with career coaching. So I started experimenting with career coaching. I think this was 2013. So I started acting in new ways. And I think, much like you mentioned, I remember the first client that actually paid me was a terrifying moment
Mm.
because, right, I was in that consulting environment where everything has to be perfect. You don't make mistakes, everything is spell checked. And suddenly I was operating in new ways and everything shifted, right? It suddenly was all about learning and having to throw myself into that vulnerability of like not knowing what I'm doing, being honest with my clients about this, and them still being crazy enough to being like, no, I actually want to work with you. And basically realizing that stepping into that vulnerability, that gap of like not knowing is where you can actually create, right? That's when you start coming up with ideas. You start basically you have to create. And that was my first experience with that. So the resume course came out of that because one of the things I quickly realized is working on your own, a side hustle, doing things like that, you can't just keep doing things that drain your energy. So I didn't like helping people with resumes and stories anymore, but I was very good at it. Um, and I kept doing the same thing over and over, and then people would be, wow. So I decided I would just create a course and basically use that as a mechanism to take everything out of my brain, make sense of what I knew, and put that into a course and just give it away to people. And I still just pretty much give it away to people.
Can you link to that? Is it still alive?
Yeah. Do you want me to link to it now or later?
Is if it doesn't, if it's not too hard, if you could, it'd be interesting to see for people to see it.
Yeah. So I'll link to um, I have the Udemy link. But while I looked that up, I think one thing I realized is when you're creating content, you suddenly realize you don't actually know what you're talking about as well as you knew it, right? As part of the creation process is actually reteaching yourself in a way to actually teach others.
Totally.
So it's this second level of learning, and I think that was eye opening for me. I think this was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I realized creating for others was this hack to basically push yourself to learn at a deeper level, which was super exciting for me as somebody that wanted to um, build a life and a career around learning.
Amazing. I found the same. Yeah, it's almost like I don't actually think I've learned something until I can show that I've taught someone. It's like
Right,
their reflection back is the proof.
right.
So when you let's see, so you're was it kind of, you said you had a health issue in around 2013, that was?
Yeah, this was around 2012, and as I was recovering in 2013, 14, I had started writing about my challenges with the health challenges still on my site now. I went through a battle with Lyme disease and some other tick-borne illnesses. But that process of like sharing that struggle and that vulnerability like tapped into something into me I don't think I realized was there around writing and just making sense of ideas and just sharing and putting things out there.
Incredible. I've heard this a lot. I feel like self-employment is such this kind of crazy path that there's usually something that makes you do it. Like something, a relative gets sick, or you lose your job, or the economy tanks, or you have I actually had something similar, a health issue right around the same time, 2013.
Oh
And I had
wow.
just like worked for a consulting firm, which is grueling work, as everyone who's done it knows. and my health was like failing. And they're like, oh yeah, just another few years and you'll be a senior project manager, and then another few years you can be a project director, and 5 years after that it was like they laid out this career path for me that I knew if I continued on, I would just be destroyed. I would be physically, physiologically just destroyed.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. I think for me, if you look back at my career, it makes perfect sense that I was basically headed out on my own. Maybe I didn't realize it in the moment, but I was very erratic with my career path. Anytime I had the potential of being promoted or going into those management levels, I basically left. Like everyone thought I was crazy because I would leave like promotions and pay raises on the table, because
Interesting.
I just kept wanting to keep learning and just being exposed to different things. So I think I was always deep down afraid of uh, become like I just looked around and didn't see a lot of lives I wanted to emulate. And then being sick, I kind of de-identified with work as the core driver of success in my life, and um, kind of going out on my own, I think, was the only option. It's not really something I can explain. It kind of just happened and was drawn to do that.
Wow. Wow. So for this first course, I think I've noticed people really have a curiosity with first courses, probably
Yeah.
because that's the state, the next step they're considering. But how did you balance? So Andrew has a question here. He said like you wanted to put a complete course out there, obviously something coherent and that was valuable and helpful, but then you also said you didn't know everything. So how do you balance that completion incompletion paradox?
You just hit publish. It sucked. the The first version of the course was not good. So the course I have up now that I linked was actually probably version 3 of it. And it was a very, very slow process. It was basically something I kind of did on the side over like, I don't know, it probably took a year to do. And it was basically just creating a bunch of slides, and then eventually buying a mic, creating the content, putting it up there, and then basically being a little disappointed with it and deep down knowing I wanted to improve it.
Hmm.
And I remember, I think over Udemy, I hired a course creator to just assess my course, take it, and give me feedback. And that was really good insight because she had experience in learning and online courses. She was able to give me some pointers to like redesign and basically make me a little more proud of the stuff. And I redid all the slides, I updated the content and put things out there. I think I was a little more proud of it. Um, Now, after creating a course with like 2 hours of content and 25 plus lectures, like that original course still doesn't look great, but I think it's still helpful in like what it's conveying and what it gives people.
Absolutely. And you said you gave it away. Was it free?
Yeah, it's so I've experimented in different ways. I think at the beginning I gave it away for free. I changed it to a paid course. Like this was on Udemy, and like signups basically disappeared. I
Hmm.
think I think there were opportunities to make money on Udemy at the beginning, but it's a really crowded platform right now.
Hmm.
Um, but as a free course now, I have it up there. Like people from all over the world are taking it. Udemy tells me 90 countries or something have taken the course. So I just find that cool. I'm sure I don't know if you found this as well, but with my consulting course as well, the most eager people I'm finding about for taking these courses are in India, Malaysia, Tanzania was somebody that signed up yesterday. And I often give them a discount or a gift price to enroll, but they're so enthusiastic, and like people around the world are just so eager for new ideas and new ways to access knowledge.
Oh, I know. I know. Okay, interesting. How did you feel around your first audience? Like what was the first group or the first community that you tapped for that first those first people that took the course when it was on Udemy?
So I didn't really think about the audience. I thought about solving a problem for one person, right? So I had done these in-person sessions where I was able to pull people's stories out and help them like revamp their resume and tell their story. And what I was really getting at with that was using the resume as a vessel to get people to believe in themselves and bring a more powerful story to life,
Mm,
right? So I had an idea in mind of like individual people. Like one of them was my brother's now wife, and I was just picturing her. She's very skeptical, and she knows me. And she pushed back. Like, how do I convey an idea to this person, right? So that was the audience I had in mind, was the people I'd already worked with, and I basically just wanted to keep helping people like that. So it was really just people that were reaching out to me. Can you help me with my resume? And my response would be like, hey, can you go through a couple exercises in this first and then come back to me? And it was crazy to see the results of this. Like people would send me their resume and it was like so much better and really telling a story. Um, and that was really all the payoff. And I was still employed at this point, so I wasn't really thinking about like building a business or anything like that.
very interesting. My wife Lauren did something similar. She she got a Fulbright Fellowship, which is this U.S. government funded fellowship to go abroad and study some usually very esoteric topic for a year, and it's completely changed her life. Especially, um, I mean, it just it completely shaped her as a person and professionally. And so for years, for maybe like 7 years, she wrote a few blog posts on it, and people would reach out, and she would spend hours working for free and
Yeah.
like giving people in-depth feedback on their Fulbright applications, and they would win. I mean, they would win on the
Wow.
backs of her advice. Like she brought them from feeling terrible to
Yeah.
winning applications. And I was like, Lauren, you have to charge for this. And so finally, this year ago, she created a course. It's called Win a Fulbright. And now she charges hundreds of dollars to do what she was happy to do for free before. I think sometimes it's like your gift, your talent, you enjoy doing it, so you don't think to charge. But it sounds like you had a transition where you kind of got tired of doing the same thing.
Yeah, that was for sure. I mean the challenges, there's a thousand resume courses. It's just not a great space if you're creating a course, and like you basically can't really charge a lot for
Mhm.
this unless you're building a brand and building a whole community around it. And it's just not something that fires me up. So a lot of that stuff I kind of just give away, and I just love helping people. Like that's what drives me.
Mhm.
Um, so I often start with that and then back into, okay, maybe I should try to support my life, which
Yeah,
is a little more real now as a self-employed creator.
totally. So what happened after that? When did the transition from Udemy to Teachable come?
So Teachable happened about a year ago with the Think Like a Strategy Consultant course. So the consulting, I had been a consultant. And about 5 years ago, I started advising an undergrad consulting group at my alma mater, which was at the University of Connecticut. And this is a school which I graduated from. When I graduated, I tried to break into consulting, and people told me, you can't work in consulting firms like this because you went to the wrong schools.
Hmm.
If you want to work at these type of companies, you have to go to grad school. Um, Long story short, I ended up breaking in before going to the right schools, and it always kind of just had a chip on my shoulder. So in 2014, I started advising this group and started like coaching them on real projects. And I was with another Boston Consulting Group alum from my school, and we were trying to run these student projects like real consulting projects. What we quickly learned is we had no idea how to teach what we knew. So basically, through 2 years of trial and error of trying to like codify our lessons to the students, like I created a whole bunch of content and training and basically started to find things that worked. Um, and really made me a better consultant. I was still working full time in consulting. I was doing like CEO and board advisory at a firm in New York, and it made me such a better consultant. I started teaching at work. I started basically offering free workshops for my coworkers on strategy consulting skills.
Interesting.
Um, so I started doing it there. That was in 2016, 2017. Um, and I eventually left to go out on my own in 2017, but it wasn't until 2018 that I started creating the course on Teachable. And there was another step in between that, but I'll pause there if you have any questions.
Was this, excuse me, how long? So you started teaching your colleagues, you said in 2016, and then the course was created 2018?
Yeah. So another thing that happened was about a year and a half ago, I use the talent platform sometimes for consulting projects, and they basically put out a bid, and it was a software consulting firm that was growing really fast in Boston, and they needed somebody to build a consulting skills training program for them.
Hmm.
I basically put a like very bold bid in that was like, listen, this is exactly like what I love doing and what I can do for you. Um, I it was a really good fit. So I basically went from like applying on Tuesday to signing a contract on Friday to develop the course for them.
What is the
Uh,
talent platform?
so it's like Catalent. It's kind of like Upwork. Catalent is a platform for strategy consulting projects for
Oh, it's
freelancers to
like
go
a
on to, and
marketplace.
it yeah,
Ah,
it's a two-sided talent marketplace.
interesting. Okay. Wow, so you built a consulting skills course for them?
Not for them, for a client that put a project out for bid.
Ah, okay.
Um, so I actually got paid to develop the content even further. So I had some of the content from developing it for the students. I had been sharing it with people one on one, testing it, and then they paid me to develop it for their company. Now I had to design it specifically for them. So it's not like I would have structured it. So they basically paid me to take it to the next level. And then after that, I basically realized this was something really fun and I could run with other companies and maybe turn into an online course. And that's kind of where I am now.
Interesting. Dude, it's funny. I have such a similar story. I also started teaching, it started as a book club actually in the consulting firm I worked for. I was like, let's read this book, GTD,
Right.
during lunch. And of course, people stopped reading the book because they're overworked consultants. And so they would just be like, Tiago, you seem to be the only one reading the book. Can you explain it to us? And before I knew it, I had slide, and then I'm like, oh, I might as well make some slides, and then I'll make some worksheets, and then I'll make a little video, and all the material just sort of arrived one day. And then I also had a couple of years, like 2014, 2015, where I was doing a lot of corporate trainings, and that kind of pushed the quality level up because you were delivering it in these corporate settings. But then at that point you're just like, oh, it's all here, let me just translate it into something public. That's really interesting. Huh. Wonder if this is like a path that we should try to lay out for people.
Well, I think the lesson is, right? And I try to convey this to people. Everyone has something that they're curious about and that they can teach, right? I've seen you write about this a lot. Um, Try to figure out like I think a lot of times people can't figure out what they want to teach because they don't know like what makes them interesting, right? Like you're living in Mexico City right now. I have so many questions. Like I'm sure like people want to know like how do you live there? How do you live as a digital nomad? How do you and these are beyond what you're already teaching, right?
Hmm.
People know how to play instruments. People know how to like there's so much obscure knowledge out there that isn't really out accessible. And I meet so many people and have conversations. Like I was talking to somebody that's competing in Muay Thai yesterday. I don't know anything about Muay Thai, but I'm sure there's at least 1,000 people in the world who are curious about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's so true. And you don't have to be, in fact, it's better if you're not an expert. There's a market for expert teachers, but like, it's like Weight Watchers. You get a sort of a mentor in Weight Watchers who just lost the weight that you are trying to lose. Like, imagine if the whoever's the CEO of Weight Watchers was your coach. You'd just be like, your life is just so far beyond and different from mine. I can't learn from you. So it's like, yeah, I see knowledge as like this series of ladders. There's all these like ladders at every different elevation, and every course is just someone on a ladder helping the people below them on that same ladder. So it's like
right.
you need every kind of niche and type of person and level of expertise in order to teach an idea.
Well, there's also the um, people people want to hear Tiago Forte's way of how to organize notes, right? But they also might want to like my approach might be radically different, right?
Mhm.
They want to know your approach. They want to know somebody else's approach. It's not just that there's a standard way of doing things. And I think I dealt with this a little, like thinking about like McKinsey has a very well known like problem solving approach. I basically looked at it and I tweaked a few things and made some things my own, tried to make things a little more fun. Like a lot of it is stale and was created in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Some of this isn't as useful anymore, right? There are better ways to do things, and there are different ways to organize things. There are better tools you can use. So I don't, there's different ways to do it, right? So if you're learning strategy consulting skills, like you also want to learn like my way of like how I'm thinking about it as well.
Yes. So
And that might not work for everyone. Like, and I want more people to create courses exactly like this so I can learn different approaches.
so true. Yeah, it's such a yeah, there's no one right way, there's no one right answer. It's a whole space. It's a whole like territory that different courses can cover different parts.
Well, this might be interesting. Can I just show a couple slides here?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
All right, I will pop this up. So I think this is interesting, right? Because of the way we're working digitally now, here is like the default of how we consume and communicate information. And I'm going to pull your course in here as well. So the digital default is like consume knowledge and then we spit it out, right? We do in PowerPoint, we do in writing. However, what we're missing and what used to exist because of how much friction there was in knowledge consumption and communicating it is this like middle gap here, right? Like, how do you transform information into powerful ideas and stories? That's the question I'm curious about. But like, that is exactly where you're playing too, right? You're building a second brain is basically like, how do you actually take this bounty of information and turn it into stuff you actually want to be focusing on? And then you have like your progressive summarization tools, right? That is just another way of doing exactly what I'm curious about, right? And like what I've created is the consulting tool approach to do this. And it's basically different languages for a lot of the same thing, right?
Totally. Yeah, pyramid principle is Barbara Minto, right?
Right. Um, and it's really the same thing as progressive summarization.
Totally. So,
Um,
so what are you saying there? Are you saying there that there's just completely different ways to approach any given kind of thing people want to do?
yeah, I mean that's a broad statement. I mean, that doesn't really mean anything, but I well, I think a lo- in our like digital world, right? We're so overwhelmed with things that I think what I'm getting at is you need to learn some framework, some deep skills, some methodology, some framework for how you want to operate or be in the world, right? Marketers have their language, design people have their language. You can combine these languages to make something very unique, but the point is like you need to go deep on learning these things such that you have a way of operating in the world. I think too many times people rush to like what the output is. So I'm sure you have people that come to you too and they're like, well, how do you build a course that um, makes money, right? And that's the wrong question. Like the question is, how do I develop a process such that I can create content in a way that I can communicate it with people? And you can use many tools to get to that point. For me, it's my background as a strategy consultant that informs the way I create content. Right? For you, it's probably similar, but it's also probably some other different toolkits and skills you have.
I really like that. I really like that. And you wrote here in your points that you you think about creating a helpful tool first and then you think about whether or how it could become a business or a product or something like that.
Yeah, so one example was I created these, and I'm going to give this away to everyone that's attending today. I created some strategy consulting templates. Like everyone seems to be amazed with the McKinsey and like the strategy consulting presentations, right? So there's basically, if you go online, there's all these PowerPoint presentation templates that I think are crap because they just look pretty. They're not designed to communicate information in a persuasive way,
Hmm.
right? So there is some structure and logic behind the presentation template. So I basically just created, I think, like 50 templates and posted on LinkedIn and said, hey, here, just download these for free. It went crazy and there was tremendous interest. So I was like, okay, there's something here. I'm going to spend 4 or 5 hours and really build this out. And then I put it on Gumroad, which is a really easy way to sell digital products, and did it at gift pricing. So you could either pay zero or you could offer a gift. People started gifting me money. So I'm like, okay, there's something here. Um, that plus creating the consulting course basically led me to create Strategy U. But I had the materials first. I didn't start with creating Strategy U. And I set up a page to just give those to everyone on the call today. So if you go to strategyu.co/Tiago, you guys can all download the templates for free.
Strategyu.co.
Yeah, I'll link that up as well.
Okay. Okay, interesting. It's funny. I had again a similar experience. I started doing the first live workshop I ever did was in this co-working space where I worked in San Francisco, and I didn't have, of course, any of my own material. I was like, I just want to get in front of people and see if I like doing that. So I just got the design thinking crash course, which is this free 2-hour workshop that the D school at Stanford, the design school, they open sourced. So it's an open license. They put a video, they put all the downloadable PDFs. They just said, here's everything. And I started doing that, and it was by donation. And there would be a pot out there or something that people could put money into. And I started just noticing that people were giving as much as I would charge for the actual thing, like 25, $30. And so one day I just started charging. And I thought, oh my gosh, people are going to like, their standards are going to increase, their expectations are going to skyrocket. But no, it was perfectly reasonable to charge that much. And I basically did that workshop for like 2 or 3 years. Every few months, I would do it, building up my presentation and facilitation muscle without having to use any of my own ideas. It's like I completely rested on the laurels of Stanford and the D School and IDEO. So I didn't
Right,
feel like I was like putting myself out there, but I was just on one. It's like I was training one skill at a time rather than trying to do everything at once.
right. Yeah, I think that's spot on. And um, I've experimented with different pricing and the gift models. So for my current course, there's a gift option, right? If you don't have the means to pay, and that is mostly because I've discovered people from all over the world want to access this. And if you have a price and then you offer a gift, like people are so grateful when they receive this, right? But if it's just for free, people end up enrolling and not actually following through. So that's why I prefer to do a gift. And then, I mean, if you don't find value, just email me and I'll refund you. But it also aligns my efforts to continually try and improve the course and figure out what's next. Um,
I like that. I've never tried gift pricing, but I have a
yeah, I
similar.
mean, I got that from Charles Eisenstein. I don't know if you've read any of his work. He wrote Sacred Economics, but it's really about this way of just thinking about you don't create to make money, right? Anyone who loves creation, you're creating because you like the act of creation or being able to help people. But there is no real purpose in like pure creation in terms of monetization, right? So you want as many people as possible to access it. And for me, the pricing is really around that.
So true. That's such an important point that's easy to lose track of. Yeah, you can't, your heart and soul has to be in it. There's got to be something of you. Otherwise it's just, Yeah, otherwise, it's just a very low hourly wage for really hard work.
Yeah, and that's our thing, right? I think with any self-employed creator, there's a constant urge to like basically pause and then focus, shift to like monetization mode, right?
Mhm.
And to like extract money. I think for me, I know I need to fight that urge because the goal is to keep the journey going as long as possible and keep creating. Um, and I know by that, I'll keep creating stuff that's better and better and it's going to help more people. And I think, I mean, you see creators sometimes you can tell because there's almost like a lack of love in the work,
Mhm.
right? When they pause and they're just focusing on monetization, you can do that. There's always, I I'm sure like you could charge more for stuff or really like double down on things you're selling.
Mhm.
Um, but there's a cost there. There's almost like this spiritual cost that you can't really quantify.
Yeah. Yeah, I found for me, something I try to do is convert as much of those like hard-edged monetization things into creative things. And one way of doing that is like writing about the behind the scenes. Like if I have to redo my email marketing, I can do that with so much more enthusiasm and passion if I
Mhm.
know that after I go through that pain, I'm going to write a post on it, which I did recently actually, and then just like share what it was like and what I learned and what the experiences were, so that at the very least, others hopefully don't have to have that same pain.
I
Uh,
love
and
that.
and people really appreciate it's weird. It's like behind the scenes stuff. It's like it's like you're simultaneously teaching people how to do what you've done, but also just like being very real and very vulnerable, where you're not trying to present just this facade of just endless perfection, success from success to success to success. In that, if you write about the behind the scenes, some of your biggest failures can become your biggest successes because
Right.
people can actually connect to you as a person.
Right. But like if you want perfection, you can go to like the Harvard Extension School and take an executive education course, right? But they're enrolling with you because they know you're struggling. They know you're trying to figure it out as you go. Like creation and trying new things is basically a constant journey of not knowing what the hell you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I
Um,
think we're seeing this incredible proliferation of online education, and it's funny to me, like people, for example, the whole thing about completion rates. Oh my gosh, only 3% complete, or only 5% get the certification. It's completely missing that like before there was one kind of education with one set of metrics. Now there
right.
are a million, each of which has different goals.
Right.
Like for me, some of the biggest, my favorite testimonials are when someone is like, I paid for your course, which is not inexpensive, and they're like, I just took these two modules, it was everything I needed, completely solved my problem, and that was it. I'm like, great, you didn't even need to spend all the time to complete the whole course to get your problem fixed. That's a better testimonial than I did everything. I checked every box perfectly, but it didn't really take action and didn't really solve any problems.
Right. Yeah, it's when I think online content is getting a lot better, especially
Mhm.
in the past couple of years. And I mean, looking around the stuff I saw, that was part of the inspiration to create what I created and really like push the level up even further. But yeah, one thing I was going to loop back to is the like creating things for like helping people first and then leading to things later. I think it might be useful to touch on like how we interacted.
Mhm.
Like I think there are a couple examples. Um, One was you had posted something on Twitter around Misi, which is a consulting topic. And
Mhm.
I've thought way too much about that topic, right? So I basically just messaged you and said, "Hey, I'm happy to jump on a call with you or like send you stuff." And I basically just put together a bunch of slides and sent it to you. Um, Mostly because like, I really just love helping people with these ideas. And I think those are the kind of things that build trust, right? And that's probably why we're on a call right now, right? Because you probably trust me a little and saw like, oh, this person's actually just interested in helping. And I think I get approached by a lot of people, and I love meeting new people, but the people I get most excited about are the ones that are like, "Hey, let me help you." hey, let me offer some feedback. Let me offer you some advice or connection or things like that.
So true. So true. And the fact that it's non-rivalrous, right? It's like even if you and I do similar things, it's not like we wouldn't be competitors because knowledge is not, we just talked about this in a course session last night. It's not like if you have some knowledge on a topic, you don't need any more knowledge on that. You've done it. It's like usually the more you know about something, the more knowledge you want. It's like an
Right.
ever expanding sphere. So like my best customers are the ones who've already taken a bunch of productivity courses, and I'm
Right.
part of that expanding sphere for them, which I just
Yeah,
love.
I don't even know what my customer focus is. It's kind of a weird space. I created the course because I thought nothing else was out there and I wanted to put it out there, but still trying to figure that part out.
It's an ever continuous
Yeah.
figuring out of things. I wanted to see if we have about 20 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions for Paul? Anything you'd like to for him to talk more about or to shed some light on? And you can either actually we're a pretty small group. You can just unmute yourself and go for it. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Thanks, Tiago. Thanks, Paul. It's a great conversation. I'm curious if you've got any advice on building an audience. You know, how you sort of approach that and things you learned along the way.
Um, yeah, I think the building an audience is an interesting question, right? I think you have to start with like who you want to be. Like, what are some of the principles? I think for me, it's building friendship. I actually have a mission statement, which I write down and reflect back on, which is I basically want to create things to help others and use friendship as like a foundation for what I'm trying to build. So like people I'm helping, I want to actually get to know them and like really help how I can help them in their work and their lives and hopefully like be something more than just work relationships. So that kind of informs how I build things. I basically try to help people first, and then they give me ideas.
Mm.
And then either things that piss me off, like, this is so frustrating that people are dealing with this. Let me see if I can create something to help with that. And then I do that for some people, and then I basically just keep putting it out there. Um, that doesn't answer the audience question directly. I don't know how to answer this. I think consistently writing is probably one of the most powerful things. I think Tiago might have some thoughtful comments. I know he has a great course he's done with David Perel around the online writing, but probably writing is the number one thing that's changed my life and led to real life connections. Basically, taking what I know, sharing my journey, being vulnerable, and communicating consistently has been the number one thing that's actually led to conversations. Um, and then creating a site, I basically have links up that say make it really obvious that I want to talk to people, and you can book a curiosity conversation with me on my site. So those are probably the things, and then really just focusing on the long game. I don't think I have a huge audience like Tiago does, but I have like 20-25 people in mind that I've talked to many times, and I continually build with them in mind. And I don't know how many that will be down the road, but it's kind of just thinking about those people I have a strong relationship with and creating with them in mind and doing it consistently.
Yeah, I'd agree that most tangibly writing is just it's unique. It's unique to meet to all forms of media, I think, especially sort of long form, in depth writing or how to writing or things that really get into the meat of things because people can self qualify. You know, every post that you put out there becomes like a little ambassador, like a little beacon that can find its way into communities, into Slack channels, into Facebook groups. And many people or most will not like it. But if it's inherently useful and from the heart and really speaks to even, 1% of your audience or of just people who find it, then those people will come back to you. And it's funny you say I have a huge audience because my whole business is built on an email list of only about 3,500 people, which in the world of online content is absolutely minuscule. That's like a micro audience. I think you're muted, Paul.
Well, I think that's the point. You don't need a big audience. When I say huge, it's like a couple hundred people, right?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people get hung up on creating stuff. They think they need to be Procter and Gamble and do something that appeals to the masses. Like Seth Godin says this really well. It's like, who are the people like me that want to go on a journey with where I'm headed, right? Who are the people like us that are a little bit nuts that want to think this way, right?
Yeah.
Like Evernote note taking is not for my parents. Right?
Yeah.
But there are enough people out there that like it's changed the way they think in their lives that you can keep creating stuff for them.
I know. It's so weird. And there's an idea I love about this minimum viable audience. I think Seth Godin talks about this too. Don't look for the biggest group of people that could become passionate about your idea. Look for the smallest. What is the smallest viable group of people that could sustain really just a conversation about a topic? And the smaller, the better, because then you can actually know all of them. You can create that critical mass. You can create a common culture and a common terminology. And they become your ambassadors, which creates that word of mouth marketing, which is just like one word of mouth marketing is worth all the Facebook ads in the world. And I think I wanted to return to what you said about like the previous online business models were about scale. You like to have a blog that made any money at all, you needed like millions of views or eyeballs or whatever. But with these, what's so exciting about online education is there's like a ceiling of what you can charge for a course that is constantly increasing. And it's getting to a point where you can have a premium based business working with really influential and successful people, say on their productivity or consulting or whatever it is, and make a living without needing to be, like you said, everything to all people. That's the exciting thing for me.
Yeah, and I think I'm wired to have conversations with people, and I love having those conversations. So I basically keep writing about things I'm excited about. People reach out. Like, for example, one of the people on the call now, I had a first conversation with 3 hours ago. Linda, she's on the call. Hey, Linda. She found a post from Quora where I wrote about consulting. I talked to her at 10 today. And by talking with her, like, I already have a couple ideas in my mind. Like, she has a completely unique journey. Everyone has a completely unique journey, right? So I'm taking ideas from her journey and being like, what would somebody in this situation be thinking about? I also create stuff for like people that are on a self-employed journey. So like what could be there? And it's constant conversations and these like bubbling of ideas that stay alive. And for me, it's basically keep the journey alive so I can keep this fun process of like conversation creation and community alive. And the other side of this is I'm living as a digital nomad. I live in Asia now. I've dramatically lowered my cost of living. And basically, I want to keep the journey alive so I can keep creating and figure out how to do this in the long run.
Yeah, I know. To kind of, Mark, I'm seeing your question here about like that kind of creating engagement with people that could lead to something deeper, such as teaching. And I think it kind of, the word that keeps coming to mind is being prolific. I noticed this about successful creators, especially ones who are sustaining themselves, is like there's an inflection point they all reach. Usually they reach it before they actually strike out on their own, where they become prolific. I kind of have this question, like I've even noticed this number 200, mostly in anecdotes, like the artist Basquiat, really his career took off after 200 pieces of art. Mm-hmm. I recently talked to a YouTube star, Thomas Frank, who's really big. And he said, yeah, about 150 or 200 videos was his inflection point. And that's probably a completely arbitrary number. But one thing to ask yourself is like, what would you just be overjoyed and so in love with that you could create 200? Not counting the hours, not counting the dollars, just like that 200 would just be this incredible journey, this quest that you could go on. And I think that one reason being prolific is interesting is to kind of answer your question, Mark, is like you kind of have to create a world. Like I think this term world building is catching on now. Like when you have 10 or 20 or 30 videos or posts or whatever it is, it's like no single post, no matter how good it is, can carry that much. Right? Like it's so rare for a post to like change your life. And sometimes even if it does change your life, you don't even know who wrote it. You're just like, oh, that was pretty cool. So you have to create this immersive environment that has enough nodes that someone can get lost in it. They can almost just like immerse themselves in it. And that way no specific node has to be just this world changing insight. So I don't know. That's my answer to that question. Do you have anything about Paul, about how to create these sort of like deeper conversations, this deeper engagement with people?
Can I maybe throw in a thought to add
Yeah.
context to the point?
Yeah. Hey, Mark.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I think in some ways, Paul, what you were getting at in terms of the curiosity conversations you have, and then identifying what might be relevant to connect somebody to, is something along the lines of what I was thinking about. I guess to tie it, Tiago, to something that you said about people who take the course and maybe only pick up, one or two modules, which happen to be the most relevant things for them. I guess my mental model of like what people are likely doing right now is sort of randomly bumping into things that might or might not be useful to them. And when I imagine sort of if you had sort of infinite knowledge about all of the things that exist in the world in terms of solutions, and really in-depth knowledge about the person, you could identify like what is the most relevant thing to connect somebody to at any given moment. Some of it might be your stuff, Tiago. Some of it might be your stuff, Paul. Some of it might be completely different. And it's probably going to be at different levels of development. So something like mindfulness is going to take, years or decades to develop. Something like, using Misi effectively is probably on the order of months or years. And I guess for me, it's like, I don't think any single individual could do it, but what do the like ecosystem or network level mechanisms look like that would facilitate sort of those types of connections being made more readily? That's sort of a central question for me right now.
I think, I don't have an answer to that. I've definitely thought about it. I think right now the platforms and ways of doing this is just not very good. I think also culturally, we don't map to learning that way and thinking about education in that way. I definitely see some changes in like the digital nomad or entrepreneur communities, but I think that's still very early. I think Tiago's post on the I think you call it like Steve's.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool post. I've been sharing with a lot of people and thinking about the future of education. But yeah, I think right now it's really messy and things are hidden on different platforms, and it's hard to know what applies to what and what's the best.
Yeah. I think that the ecosystem approach is interesting because it's like, I mean, this was the big lesson we realized in Rite of Passage, the writing course that just finished last night, is, everyone seemed to have this paradigm that David and I, who write a lot, we publish a lot, that we call it the Thoreau model, that we go into our little cabin and we just like think really hard. When in fact, and this actually surprised the video team. We hired a video team to film the course with us, and they would be surprised that anytime we're stuck, the moment we're stuck, we go out. We get on Twitter, start testing ideas. We get on we call like our parents, like, what do you think of this? Because parents are a very good test because they aren't into the same things you are. We're like calling. It was like our feedback loops for our thinking extended out into the ecosystem and into other people, and we didn't see ourselves as relying on ourselves at all, which just completely lifted that burden that we had to like solve the thing.
Yeah, and that gets back to how I created this course. It was basically, it took 250 hours in December, but really it took 5 years. And it was a series of basically doing things in the real world and seeing what works and what didn't work, trial and error. And I think, and then the higher level question is like, how do you connect these? How do people discover these? Like, I am sure there is somebody that needs your course right now, Tiago, right? Like, there's no doubt. And that there are those examples that will never find your course too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there is somebody that, like, I know it would help them if they found my course, but I don't know how to find them, right? It's a matching problem, and this has been a problem with everything. Talent markets, online two-sided platforms for forever, and there is no real good solution for it.
Yeah, I love that perspective. Someone needs what you have to offer, and they either can't find you, or you can't find them, or they can't afford you. That's something I noticed in consulting is like consulting is kind of a way for really wealthy corporations to borrow ideas from each other without getting in antitrust litigation.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
It's like they route what they know through consulting firms. Consulting firms become these clearinghouses of knowledge. But that's just making the rich richer. And an online course, even one that's $500 or $1,000, is that's so cheap compared to the impossibility of accessing a lot of these things otherwise. That's why I feel absolutely no guilt at the prices I charge, knowing what, say, a corporate training costs.
Right.
It's just it's a relative comparison, and I think there's gonna be new models that combine the best of both worlds, that can be as engaging as I need them to be, and that we can still scale. This is something that we're looking at with Rite of Passage. But someone, Lina, in the chat asked for a coupon code. If did you mention a coupon code for the strategy consulting course?
Yeah, it should be in the link I sent.
Okay.
There's also gift options if you guys don't have the means. You can submit. One thing I found on the gift offer is having people go through an exercise just to, like, share their intentions and, like, what they feels right for a gift usually ends in a better um, opportunity for each other.
Well, we have a few minutes left here, but there's a couple questions in the chat that I think are beyond the scope of the last few minutes here. But what do you have? What are you looking forward to in the future? Like, what do the next year or two or more look like for you? Like, where are you headed? What are you excited about?
For me, so I think I've um, I've found that I basically fell for somebody in Asia. So I'm living with her now. We're starting a relationship and a journey together, and the big shift for me is really designing my life around my life, or designing my work around my life. So I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to create things like this that help people. Um, I'm trying to figure out what the balance is of different types of work, different income streams to support my life. And I'm also just trying to experiment in new ways like this and learn from people and see what other opportunities emerge in my brain, what's fun, how to think about living life, working, and creating in the modern world. So that's kind of what's on my plate. I'm also developing a solopreneur course to help people shift to solopreneurship. And that's another case where I actually ran a digital course in, like, out live with people last summer. And I'm going to basically reverse that to a self-paced online course as well. So
Amazing.
doing that over the next month while I'm home visiting family in the US.
Amazing. I love that model. Yeah, figure out the messy questions live. And then
Yeah,
once there's clear enough answers, it never becomes completely clear. Then you just switch it into self-paced.
exactly.
Awesome. Cool, everyone. Well, I want to finish actually even a couple minutes early. Thank you for being here. And thank you so much, Paul, for sharing everything that you've been through. It's quite an amazing journey. And I have a strong feeling it's at the very, very beginning.
It's fun. And I think, yeah, that's my driver. Just keep the journey going.
Infinite game.
Exactly.
Totally. Well, thanks, everyone. I'll see you online.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.